Welcome to our exploration of Ra. Sounds like you're really ready to kind of unravel some of the mysteries surrounding this like iconic Egyptian sun god. We've got some great material to work with today, and I think you'll be surprised by just how much more there is to this god.
You're absolutely right. He's much more than just sunshine.
Yeah.
Ra's influence um, permeates Egyptian mythology, touching on creation, kingship, and even the journey through the afterlife.
Oh, wow. Okay, so let's start with that classic image everybody knows. Ra with the head of a falcon, guiding the sun across the sky in his solar bark.
Yeah, that image is a great starting point, but it's just one part of a much larger story.
Okay.
The Egyptians believed that Ra's journey didn't end when the sun set. In fact, that's when things get really interesting.
Oh, I'm intrigued. Tell me more. What happens after the sun dips below the horizon?
Every night, Ra boards his evening bark, the Mesektet, and begins a perilous voyage through the underworld, a realm known as the Duat.
The underworld. That sounds a bit more intense than a leisurely sunset cruise.
It definitely wasn't a relaxing trip. The Duat was a place of shadows and dangers, and Ra had to face numerous challenges during his nightly passage. The most formidable of these was the serpent Apophis, a creature who embodied chaos and sought to devour the sun, plunging the world into eternal darkness.
That this wasn't just a physical journey. There's a symbolic meaning woven into it as well.
Exactly. For the Egyptians, Ra's nightly struggle against Apophis represented the eternal battle between order and chaos, light and darkness. Each morning, when the sun rose again, it signified Ra's triumph over chaos and the renewal of life.
I see. So by connecting Ra's journey to these fundamental forces, the Egyptians were essentially explaining the cycle of day and night, life and death.
Precisely. They saw these cycles playing out every single day, reinforcing their belief in Ra's power and their place within the cosmic order.
It's amazing how they found such profound meaning in the everyday occurrences of the natural world. But Ra wasn't just about the sun's journey, was he? He was also deeply connected to the act of creation itself.
Absolutely. In Egyptian mythology, Ra is considered a creator god, responsible for bringing forth life itself. He doesn't just bring light, he brings existence.
And there's this fascinating idea that humans were created from Ra's tears and sweat. Such a visceral image, isn't it? It really makes you think about the Egyptians' view of the gods and their relationship with humanity.
It certainly does. It suggests a very intimate connection between the divine and the mortal, with humans being formed from the very essence of the creator god.
So it wasn't just about Ra creating the world. He played a much more personal role in shaping the fate of humanity.
Yes, and this creative power extended beyond just humans. Ra is also credited with creating other gods like Shu, who represents air, and Tefnut, who embodies moisture.
It's like this whole cascading effect with Ra as the ultimate source of everything. From him came the fundamental elements of life, the other gods, and eventually humanity itself.
That's a great way to put it. And there's this fascinating concept that Ra brought these things into existence by uttering their true names. The Egyptians believed that names held power, and that to know a thing's true name was to have control over it.
So in a way, Ra was like a master wordsmith, shaping the world through language itself. That really highlights the importance of knowledge and language in Egyptian beliefs.
Exactly. They saw knowledge as a sacred and powerful force intimately connected to creation and the workings of the universe.
All right, so we've got Ra as the sun god, the creator god. But what about his role in Egyptian society? How did his influence manifest in their daily lives and their understanding of power?
Well, that's where things get even more interesting. As Ra's prominence grew, he became closely linked with the pharaohs, the rulers of Egypt.
Right. I've heard about the pharaohs being called sons of Ra. I'm guessing that wasn't just a figure of speech.
Not at all. It was a powerful declaration meant to legitimize their role and connect them directly to the most powerful force in the cosmos.
Yeah, I can see how aligning yourself with the sun god would be a pretty effective way to assert your authority.
Absolutely. The pharaohs saw themselves as Ra's representatives on Earth, responsible for maintaining order and justice, just as Ra did in the heavens.
So this connection to Ra permeated their entire reign. It wasn't just about religious devotion. It was a way of solidifying their power and justifying their rule.
It was a brilliant strategy that intertwined religion and politics, creating a system where the pharaoh's power was virtually unassailable.
Now, this is where I have a question. We've been talking about Ra's power, his role as creator, his connection to the pharaohs. It all seems very absolute. But I know that even in mythology, things are rarely that simple.
Hmm.
Were there any challenges to Ra's authority, any stories that suggest he wasn't completely untouchable?
That's a great question, and it leads us to some of the most intriguing aspects of Ra's story. Despite his immense power, there were indeed instances where he was challenged, outsmarted, or even manipulated.
Oh, I'm all ears. Tell me more about these challenges to Ra's authority. What kind of stories are we talking about here?
Well, there's the famous myth of Isis tricking Ra to obtain his secret name. This story showcases not only the power of knowledge, but also the limits of even divine power.
Isis, the goddess of magic and motherhood, outsmarting the sun god himself. That sounds like a story I need to hear.
It's a classic tale of cunning and determination, and it reveals a more nuanced side to both Ra and the Egyptian understanding of power dynamics. But we'll delve into that fascinating story a little later.
Okay, now I'm really hooked. We've only just begun to explore Ra, and already we've uncovered so much. We've got his journey through the underworld, his creative powers, his connection to the pharaohs, and even hints of challenges to his authority. Where do we go from here?
Well, we've only scratched the surface of Ra's story. Next, we'll explore those challenges in more detail and see how they shed light on the limits of power, even for a god as mighty as Ra.
I'm especially curious to hear about those challenges to Ra's authority that you mentioned earlier. It seems like even the most powerful god in the Egyptian pantheon wasn't entirely immune to conflict.
That's a keen observation, and it speaks to the complexity of Egyptian mythology. The gods weren't just static figures of absolute power. They had personalities, rivalries, vulnerabilities, just like mortals.
Okay, so tell me about these challenges to Ra. What kind of stories are we dealing with here?
Well, one of the most famous is the myth of Isis tricking Ra to obtain his secret name. It's a story that highlights the power of knowledge and cunning, even in the face of divine might.
This is the one where Isis heals Ra after he's been poisoned, right? But she only agrees to help if he reveals his true name to her.
Exactly. Isis, the goddess of magic and motherhood, was fiercely protective of her son, Horus, who she believed was the rightful heir to the throne of Egypt. To help Horus secure his claim, she needed to acquire Ra's secret name, as it held immense power.
So she essentially outsmarted the sun god himself. That's pretty bold.
It was a daring move, and it speaks to Isis's determination and her mastery of magic. By obtaining Ra's secret name, she gained a measure of control over him, and by extension, over the cosmic order that he represented.
That's incredible. It seems like the Egyptians weren't afraid to portray their gods as fallible, even vulnerable to manipulation.
That's right. These myths weren't simply tales of divine glory. They also explored the complexities of power, the limits of knowledge, and the potential for even the most powerful beings to be outwitted.
It's a much more nuanced and frankly more interesting way of looking at mythology than just assuming that gods were all-knowing and all-powerful.
I agree. It adds a layer of intrigue and complexity to these stories, and it reminds us that even in ancient cultures, people grappled with questions about the nature of authority and the potential for those in power to be challenged.
So we've got these instances where Ra's authority is directly challenged, like in the story of Isis. But were there other ways in which his power evolved or was shared over time?
Absolutely. One of the most significant developments in Ra's story is his merging with other deities. This process, known as syncretism, was quite common in ancient Egypt as different regions, and their associated gods were brought together under a unified belief system.
You mentioned Amun-Ra earlier. That's a prime example of this merging of gods, right?
Exactly. Amun was originally a local god associated with Thebes, but as his popularity grew, he was eventually combined with Ra to create Amun-Ra, a supremely powerful deity who embodied both the creative force of Amun and the life-giving energy of the sun.
It's like they created this ultimate power couple of the Egyptian pantheon.
You could say that. Amun-Ra became the king of the gods, and his cult had immense influence, particularly during the New Kingdom, when Thebes was at the height of its power.
So these mergers weren't just about combining different aspects of divinity. They were also tied to political power and the shifting landscapes of Egyptian society.
Precisely. Religion and politics were deeply intertwined in ancient Egypt, and the evolution of the gods often reflected the changing dynamics of power and influence.
It makes you wonder if the pharaohs had a hand in promoting these mergers, perhaps to further solidify their own authority by aligning themselves with the most powerful gods.
That's a very insightful observation. While we can't say for certain, it's certainly possible that the pharaohs played a role in shaping the evolution of religious beliefs to suit their political goals. After all, they were seen as the earthly representatives of the gods, and their legitimacy was often tied to their perceived closeness to the divine.
It's fascinating to see how these stories reflect not just religious beliefs, but also the social and political structures of ancient Egypt.
It's a reminder that mythology is never just about gods and goddesses. It's a reflection of the culture, the values, and the power dynamics of the society that created it.
Okay, so we've talked about challenges to Ra's authority and his merging with other gods. But I'm still curious about that nightly journey through the underworld. It seems so central to his story, yet we haven't explored it in much detail yet.
You're right. Ra's nightly voyage through the Duat is one of the most significant and symbolic aspects of his mythology. It's not simply about the sun setting and rising again. It's about facing challenges, overcoming darkness, and ultimately ensuring the renewal of life.
All right, let's talk about that journey. What can you tell me about the Duat and the challenges Ra faced there?
The Duat was a mysterious and dangerous realm believed to be the land of the dead. It was a place of shadows and trials where Ra encountered a variety of creatures and obstacles that tested his strength and resolve.
What kind of obstacles are we talking about?
Well, there was the serpent Apophis, of course, who we've already discussed. He represented chaos and sought to prevent Ra from completing his journey, thereby plunging the world into darkness.
That sounds pretty terrifying. How did Ra manage to overcome such a formidable foe?
He relied on his cunning, his magical powers, and the help of other deities who accompanied him on his journey.
So it wasn't just a solo mission. He had a support system down there in the underworld.
Exactly. He wasn't alone in this perilous journey. In fact, the myth of Ra's nightly voyage through the Duat is often seen as a metaphor for the journey of the soul after death, a journey that required guidance, protection, and ultimately the hope of rebirth.
That's a beautiful way to think about it.
Mm.
So while on the surface, it's a story about the sun's journey, it also has these deeper layers of meaning about life, death, and the eternal cycle of renewal.
Exactly. And that's what makes Egyptian mythology so compelling. These stories operate on multiple levels, weaving together the cosmic and the personal, the divine and the human.
It sounds like we've only just begun to unravel the mysteries of Ra's story.
We've certainly covered a lot of ground, but there's always more to explore.
Well, I'm ready for more. What other aspects of this sun god await our exploration?
Next, we'll look more closely at some of the key figures in Ra's world, his family and entourage of gods and goddesses who played essential roles in his stories and added layers of complexity to his character. And now we turn our attention to another fascinating aspect of his story, the intricate web of relationships that surrounded him. Ra wasn't a solitary figure. He had a family, a court, and a host of companions who played crucial roles in his myths and added depth to his character.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier that Ra was often depicted with other gods and goddesses. Who are some of the key players in his world that we should know about?
Well, let's start with one of the most prominent and beloved figures in Egyptian mythology, Bastet, the cat goddess.
Bastet. She's often depicted as a sleek and graceful feline, right? What was her connection to Ra?
Bastet was considered the cat of Ra, and she played a vital role as his protector. Remember the serpent Apophis, the embodiment of chaos who threatened Ra's nightly journey through the underworld?
Oh yes, that terrifying creature who wanted to devour the sun.
Precisely. Well, Bastet was a fierce defender against Apophis, often depicted battling him with her sharp claws and unwavering courage. She represented the protective aspect of Ra's power, ensuring that he could complete his journey and bring forth the dawn each day.
So she was like Ra's fierce guardian, always ready to defend him from those who sought to disrupt the cosmic order.
Exactly. And her connection to Ra went even deeper than that. Bastet was also associated with the Eye of Ra, a powerful symbol that represented Ra's feminine energy and his ability to see all, even in the darkest corners of the universe.
The Eye of Ra. That sounds intriguing. What can you tell me about the symbol?
The Eye of Ra was a multifaceted concept that embodied various aspects of Ra's power. It could represent his wrath, his protection, or his ability to illuminate the world. In some myths, the eye even took on a life of its own, becoming a separate goddess who could act independently of Ra.
So it's like this powerful force that emanates from Ra, capable of both creation and destruction, depending on the circumstances.
Exactly. And Bastet, as the cat of Ra and the embodiment of the eye, represented this duality in a very tangible way. She could be gentle and nurturing, but also fierce and protective when the situation demanded it.
It sounds like the Egyptians had a very sophisticated understanding of the feminine aspect of divinity, recognizing that it encompassed both strength and compassion.
You're absolutely right. The feminine wasn't seen as subservient or weak. It was recognized as a powerful and essential force just as important as the masculine. And in Ra's mythology, we see this duality beautifully expressed through the figures of Bastet and another powerful goddess, Sekhmet.
The Sekhmet. She's the lion goddess, right? I heard she has quite a formidable reputation.
Indeed she does. Sekhmet was another daughter of Ra, and she embodied the fierce destructive aspect of his power. She was associated with war, fire, and the scorching heat of the sun.
She sounds like a force to be reckoned with. What role did she play in Ra's story?
Well, there's a famous myth about Sekhmet's rage that illustrates both her power and the importance of balance in the cosmos. The story goes that humans began to rebel against Ra's rule, and he became so enraged that he sent Sekhmet down to Earth to punish them.
I can imagine that didn't end well for those who crossed the sun god.
You're right, Sekhmet went on a rampage, unleashing her fury and nearly wiping out all of humanity.
So she was basically the divine instrument of Ra's wrath. But how did this rampage end? Surely Ra didn't want to see all of creation destroyed.
No, he didn't. Eventually, Ra realized that Sekhmet's rage had gone too far, and he had to find a way to pacify her before she destroyed everything.
What did he do?
He created a special brew of beer and colored it red to resemble blood. Then he spread this concoction across the land, hoping that Sekhmet, in her bloodthirsty frenzy, would mistake it for the real thing.
That's quite a trick. Did it work?
It did. Sekhmet, exhausted from her rampage and attracted by the color of the beer, drank deeply and soon fell into a drunken slumber. Her rage subsided and humanity was spared from complete annihilation.
Wow, that's quite a story. It highlights the duality of Sekhmet's nature, doesn't it? She could be a terrifying force of destruction, but also susceptible to more primal urges, like her thirst for what she thought was blood.
It's a reminder that even the most powerful deities have their weaknesses and can be swayed by clever manipulation or, in this case, a well-timed beverage.
It's also a testament to Ra's wisdom and his ability to find creative solutions to even the most dire situations. He wasn't just a distant, all-powerful god. He was actively involved in the affairs of humanity, using his cunning and compassion to guide them through difficult times.
Exactly. And that's what makes these myths so enduring. They offer insights into the complexities of power, the importance of balance, and the enduring connection between the divine and the human.
I feel like we've only just scratched the surface of Ra's story, but our time is coming to a close. What's the one key takeaway you hope our listener will remember about Ra and his world?
I would say that Ra's story is a testament to the power of transformation and the cyclical nature of life. He was the sun god, yes, but he was also a creator, a ruler, a father, and even a trickster at times. His journey through the sky, his encounters with other deities, his struggles and triumphs all reflect the ebb and flow of existence, the constant interplay of light and darkness, order and chaos. So as we conclude our exploration of Ra, I encourage you to continue exploring the rich tapestry of Egyptian mythology. There are countless stories waiting to be discovered, each offering its own unique insights into the human experience and our place in the cosmos.
Thanks for joining us today.